Welcome back to the Pro Bono YouTube channel. Today, I'm speaking with Spencer Mellace. Spencer owns and operates Experience Financial Coaching and Consulting, where he works with business owners and their families, helping them manage the challenges of estate and succession planning. Spencer holds the Certified Financial Planner Professional designation, the Trust and Estate Practitioner designation, and a Chartered Life Underwriter designation. Spencer's here today to talk about getting a handle on your finances and building financial resilience. Welcome to the channel, Spencer.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here.
Spencer, why is it important to build financial resilience?
Yeah, awesome question. I think it's one of those things that we're not taught as a subject in school. And so I think we're all compelled to have experiences and use our experiences to build financial resilience throughout our lifetimes. In terms of why it's important, I mean, there's going to be ups and downs in life in general, and resilience in general is important to be able to navigate those ups and downs. But from a financial perspective, when there's overwhelm or stress associated with the financial situation, I think that some of the financial decisions can suffer. And sometimes maybe we revert to behaviors and patterns around money that maybe haven't been that successful for us or helpful for us in the past. But because of the overwhelm and the lack of resiliency, there's the opportunity to perhaps make bad financial or not as good financial decisions. And this can happen at different levels of financial, stability or different levels of wealth. It can go from, making bad decisions about expenses or where to spend money. It can go to making bad decisions about, when to invest or what to invest in, or pulling money out of the market at the wrong time. And so from the flip side, if that resiliency exists, you can use your prefrontal cortex, your creativity. We've been through this before. There are ups and downs in markets. Maybe if somebody loses their job or their job changes or mortgage rates go up, if there's financial resilience, if you build that resilience, you maybe have access to your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that stores the knowledge and wisdom you've accumulated in your lifetime. The difficult thing is, when we flip our lids, right? So the prefrontal cortex, when we become overwhelmed and stressed, we revert to that survival mechanism, which is really good if we're outrunning a saber-toothed tiger. But if we're trying to have really good creative financial decisions that are going to help us in that moment and longer term, we want to have access to our prefrontal cortex. We want to put our lid back on. And so having resilience, having experiences, building that resilience allows us to access that creative, more wise part of our brain. And so I think that's a really, really important thing to build that resilience. And if we revert to that more primal part of our brain and we make maybe not great financial decisions, it becomes a vicious cycle that continues a little bit. But with some resilience, we make better decisions, we make creative decisions, we keep the big picture in mind, and then that builds and that snowballs in potentially a very good way. So financial resilience is a very, very important thing for all the reasons I've rambled on about for feels like 20 minutes now.
That's great. No, that's a great start. And it leads perfectly into the next question. So we now know how important it is to have that resilience. What would you say are the basic building blocks for people who might feel out of control with their finances so that they can put a stronger foundation in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's two sides to the financial equation, both from an income perspective and an assets perspective. But let's focus on, money in, money out. There's the revenue or the income side and the expense side. So having a grasp and having a handle on where is your money coming in from and where is your money going out from. And, if being in a difficult situation or a stressful financial situation is what's going on, it's important to understand, is that revenue based or is that expense based? If it's revenue based, then it's okay. Well, what do we do about the revenue? What do we do about the income? If it's expense based, what do we do about the expenses? Or there's some things that we can cut? Do we need to learn to budget a little bit better? And, from a building blocks perspective, just really a knowledge about money and how money works. A lot of us maybe weren't taught lessons explicitly about money when we grew up. We maybe inherited some behaviors, maybe some good, maybe some bad. But in terms of really having a comfort with money, a lot of families, financial conversations were sort of taboo. Maybe they didn't happen. And so people often of sort of our vintage may come from a household where they don't have a lot of experience or dialogue or on purpose teaching about money. So getting comfortable with money, reading, looking at people that have been successful, really becoming kind of your own money warrior, getting a comfort with money, with the income side, the expense side. That's a very specific thing, but just in general, starting to get a comfort with money, that money comes in, money goes out, and then understanding, perhaps some of your own behaviors around money, and if they're serving you well, where they came from, or if they're not serving you well, where did they come from, and why are they playing out? And once you have that knowledge and that awareness, you can start to repattern and repurpose your behaviors around money to perhaps a way that's maybe serves your objectives in your life a little bit better.
Very cool. And what are some of the hurdles that people that may be in a low income situation that they'll face when they're trying to build that resilience? Things like emotional hurdles, maybe mental or financial hurdles, because it's hard to kind of come to start from a place where you feel like you're kind of, maybe you're pushed down and you're in a bad space right now. Like what kind of things can they do to sort of get themselves going? What kind of encouragement can you offer them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you're from an income perspective at a level where you're trying to put food on the table and you're trying to put a roof over your head and you're just trying to make ends meet, it doesn't seem like there's a lot more coming in, or even maybe enough coming in to cover, sort of the basic necessities. That's and never mind being creative, that maybe is a more literal survival state. So, having that fight or flight or that survival mentality is maybe a necessity in that scenario. So, and I think the difficulty with that as well is, even as the revenue or the income side changes, it's possible to continue to have that scarcity mentality. And so where you potentially solve that difficult, how are we going to get by right now situation, then that mindset and that mentality maybe carries forward into, things are actually going okay now, but the financial decisions aren't being made with the long term in mind. They're being made from a fearful day-to-day perspective. So that is definitely, a difficult hurdle, from that perspective, sort of getting past that, survival state, and then beyond that, changing that survival state to a more creative and abundance mentality, when literally maybe there's more money coming in than is needed, but mentally it still feels like a scarcity mindset. So I think that is a big hurdle, and I think there's a lot of online resources now in terms of understanding your behavior and your relationship with money, how you've approached your finances. I think we'll have an opportunity maybe to talk about some of those resources later. But yeah, I think that's a very specific hurdle is, it's not a perceived life or death or survival. It's actually a real survival situation. And that's a real challenge.
And like you bring up resources, and that's great. Like I think maybe we could spend some time now talking about that. So like somebody who's watching this video that's identifying a lot with the things that you've outlined, some of those hurdles, and they say, you know what, that is me. Like I feel that, and I want to make some positive steps forward, and I want to, find some places to go. Could you talk about some things? Like you sent me some notes before the call, and I saw some of them, like, oh, this is great. Like I really am excited that we're going to get some of the stuff on the channel. So maybe you could talk about some of the resources you have listed here.
Yeah, for sure. So I go to books a lot, like I read a lot. And so I just wrote, I mentioned a few books that sort of came top of my mind that I've read over the years. And then there's a couple of websites that's quite accessible. So the Money Coaching Institute, www.moneycoachinginstitute.com, www.moneymentors.ca. I don't know if perhaps you'll put these in the show caption.
Yeah.
But I know myself personally, I worked with somebody from Money Coaching Institute on my own personal money behaviors years and years ago. And, they have some free resources around archetypes. So an archetype is a way of a character essentially that represents a financial behavior. And there's a whole bunch that are listed on that website. And you can have your own money archetype going through the questionnaire, and they'll send that to you without, signing up with a money coach. But there's money warriors and there's money magicians, and then there's, Pollyannas that have their heads in the sand, and there's all these different behaviors. And if you understand these behaviors, perhaps you can start to understand, well, these are some of the things that I've always done. And if you were to really want to get into it, you can say, well, where did I get that from? Well, mom and dad used to always say this. That doesn't really make much sense logically, but I can see how that's been playing out in my life. But if you have that awareness, and if you've done sort of, and we all may have some of these different in our MO and how we behave with money, but Some of them are useful and some of them are not as useful. And we really want to have the money warrior and maybe the magician sort of driving the bus,
Mm.
right? And then
Hmm.
some of those other archetypes are maybe okay at some times, but they're not okay at others. So yeah, I really like that because I went through that program with a coach a number of years ago.
Mm.
And there's a lot of awareness there that you can get about yourself and your behaviors. And some books that I've read over the years, The Richest Man in Babylon, that's kind of a classic. It's an easy read. The Wealthy Barber, The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson. That's, money's kind of not real, right? Like it's not a fiat currency. It's not tied to the value of gold as it once was.
Mm.
So we all just sort of agree upon its value. But so that's got an interesting psychology to it, if you will, as well. And
Mm.
so reading books like that, reading about money, reading about the way people have treated money and grown wealth or lost money or invested, or I think some of those books are really interesting. The Richest Man in Babylon's an older book. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, if you're sort of feeling stuck and you want to
Mm.
think in a more creative way about money. So these are all sort of just different books and different ways to approach, your relationship with money, because someone that's perhaps struggling from a financial perspective and then someone that's from a outward perception doing really well financially, a lot of times this person's making a lot of money, but they're spending more than they're making.
Mm.
And we all know people like that.
Yeah.
And it's because they're trying to keep up with their neighbors and they've got so much debt and so much leverage, they're almost imprisoned by their wealth.
Mm.
So that person maybe needs help and coaching as much as the person that maybe has enough to make their family's life work, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot extra. Rich is really having more than you need. Okay,
Mm.
so the two sides of that equation again, you have something and you need something, but you can often adjust what it is that you need to make yourself rich if
Mm.
there's a gap there.
Mm.
So there's a lot more than we can do than we sometimes think. Getting some comfort with money and reading books, using some of the online resources, that there's a lot we can do, and sometimes it's our thinking that needs to change. It's hard. We talked about it earlier in that vicious cycle. Like it just feels like there's not enough. I'm just trying to get by.
Mm.
But if you can find a little time to do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of research, and start to, build that financial resilience, start to build that creativity. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but all these things seem to be tying together now.
No, this is helpful. And like, even as you're describing some of these resources, I'm like, man, I'm going to go check out a couple of these things myself because there's just so much good stuff out there. And I think, like you said, like a lot of this stuff does come down to just sort of maybe changing your frame a little bit and looking through a different lens, and books can certainly help you with that. Thanks for doing this, Spencer. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mark.
And thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. There are going to be resources, the ones that Spencer described in the video today, listed in the description section below, as well as information on how to get in contact with the FPAC Pro Bono Committee if you have a question that you need answered. Thanks again for watching, and I'll speak with you soon. Take care.